Again, welcome to all participating in this webinar. As you already know, this is a webinar that will be focusing on bovine reproduction. Tonight, I have the great pleasure of introducing two internationally renowned bovine reproduction specialists. First, Dr. Gabriel Bo, president of the Instituto de Reproducción Animal de Córdoba and professor at the Universidad Nacionalidad Villa Maria in Córdoba, Argentina. Dr. Bo received his DVM in Argentina in 1985. He also achieved a Master and PhD of Veterinary Sciences in 1991 and 1995, respectively, from the University of Saskatchewan in Canada. Either as first or co-author, Dr. Bo has regularly produced peer-reviewed publications, too many to count. As well, Dr. Bo is often an invited speaker during international congresses and seminars. Finally, Dr. Bo is the recipient of the 2020 CIMET Prize for Assisted Reproduction, given by the International Congress on Animal Reproduction. Now for Dr. Alejo Menchaca, our second speaker tonight. Dr. Menchaca graduated as a doctor in veterinary medicine at the University of the Republic in Montevideo, Uruguay in 2000, with a Master of Science in 2005 and a PhD in 2009. After completing his PhD, Dr. Menchaca founded the Instituto de Reproducción Animal de Uruguay in 2009, with a focus on R&D in the area of animal reproduction and exploring, for example, in vitro embryo production and transgenesis and gene editing. In 2019, Dr. Menchaca received the International Embryo Technology Society Early Career Achievement Award. To me, both Dr. Bo and Dr. Menchaca are not only well-published scientists, but they are also excellent teachers from whom I learn every time I have a chance to talk and exchange with them. So I will let now the floor to Dr. Gabriel Bo.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for the introduction. And I would like to thank everyone for attending this webinar. I will now share my presentation. So you can see my presentation.
Yes.
And everything is all right?
Yeah.
Okay. So now I will start with what Paul asked me to talk about, which is updates in timed artificial insemination in dairy cattle. Just as the way of introduction, we all know that there are many factors affecting reproductive efficiency, and they are all related to fertility. But there are many things that we will not talk in this presentation that are also related to fertility. Today, the main objective is to talk about how we can achieve better reproduction. So as a matter of introduction, we must say that now dairy production is very efficient in many parts of the world. And what are those producers mainly doing? First of all, they are inseminating all cows within the 21 days of the voluntary waiting period. The second thing, which is very important, they identify the non-pregnant cow as early as possible. We now can use real-time ultrasonography to do that, and then re-inseminate all the cows as soon as possible as well. And the other important thing is that everyone now has agreed that the best way to measure reproduction is to use what we call the pregnancy rate, or the 21-day pregnancy rate. So the 21-day pregnancy rate is the percentage of eligible cows that become pregnant within a 21-day period. So it's a moving target that we can use, and if things do not go very well, we can change on the run. So that's why everyone uses that, because we can evaluate that every 21 days. When we start working with that, the goal back in 1995 was to have at least 15% of the cows pregnant every 21 days. But then things got better. And in year 2000, that target was moved to 18%. In 2005, that target was moved to 20%. In 2010, the target was moved to 22%. And now our target is to be superior than 25%. And in fact, many farms now are well above the 25%. The reason for that is now we understand better the modern dairy cow physiology, and that we can have now protocols that we can achieve high pregnancy rate. So the first protocols that were used back in 1995, the objective was to increase the submission rate to avoid the problem of estrus detection. Now the protocols that we have are programs that not only avoid the problem of estrus detection, but also increase the fertility of the cows. So if we go back to why we need to have those protocols, it's all related to profitability. And in order to have profitability, the milk production should be superior compared to the feeding cost. So in this graph, which I'm sure most of you have seen, we have the days in milk and the feeding cost and the milk production. So if we put when is the most profitable time, it's about 100-day in milk when the cow should get pregnant to achieve the better outcome that we want to have in a dairy farm. In order to have that, we need to have at least a 30% pregnancy rate every 21 days. And that means that our calving interval is about 385 days. If we don't do that, if we have a poor reproduction, then, for example, our pregnancy rate is 21, in 21 days is 18%, then our calving interval will be 428 days. And then our farm will not be that profitable. In order to do that, we have many things available today. One of the things that we have available are the automatic monitoring systems in which we can detect the cows in heat, but we can also look at other health conditions. And as you can see in the graph on the right, there has been many publications use this technique to improve estrus detection. Now, many times, many practitioners discuss if these new electronic devices are actually better, or if we use them, we don't need a Timed AI protocol, that we don't need to use synchronization protocol. And in fact, I will make the case that both are actually complementary. And just to show that, this is a recent study done in Cornell by one of my ex-students, Julio Giordano, who's now faculty in Cornell. And in here, they compare pregnancy rates in the first 85 days in milk using two approaches. The first approach was using estrus detection AI, using electronic devices, and then all the cows that were not bred by them were AI by Timed AI. And the other group were 100% Timed AI. And as you can see here in the results, the overall pregnancy rate was actually higher when we use the Timed AI compared to the estrus detection. Of course, this is the first service pregnancy rate. Then if you go in the other services, then things get more equal. But the main point here is that if you want to use an estrus detection device, you cannot wait too much time to get the cows pregnant, because it takes time for the cows to show estrus. So in other words, to achieve the same pregnancy rate that you would have with the Timed AI program, you need to start breeding your cows as early as possible in order to get the same pregnancy rate. Now, if we are going to talk about Timed AI protocols, in the world, we have basically two protocols. One is the OpSync protocol and many derivatives of that protocol, which was developed by Milo Wilbank in 1995. So next year is going to be 30 years from the first publication of that protocol. And then the other protocol is based on estradiol and progesterone, which we developed at the University of Saskatchewan with Dr. Ruben Mapletov. And this is a protocol that is available mainly in Latin America. Now, regardless what protocol we are going to use for fixed Timed AI, there are 5 key physiological factors that we need to keep in mind when we develop a good fertility program. The first one is to have an effective synchronization of a new follicular wave. The second is to have adequate progesterone during the follicular development. The third one is to have a complete luteal regression and good estrus expression. The fourth one is to have a synchronized ovulation. And the fifth one is to have an adequate cell that will produce adequate progesterone after insemination. So how we are going to achieve these five key physiological factors? First one, we are going to use either GnRH or estradiol and progesterone to avoid the persistent follicle. The second one, if the cow is cycling, then she has progesterone on her own. If not, we need to insert a progesterone releasing device. And that will increase oocyte quality. And if we have high progesterone, we are not going to have that many double ovulations. Thirdly, we need 1 or 2 good prostaglandin injections to induce luteal regression that will guarantee that we have fertilization and a good uterine environment, because the cows are going to show estrus, and this is good for the embryo development. Then we are going to use GnRH or estradiol to synchronize the time of ovulation. And if we do all that, we are going to achieve high conception rates, or pregnancy rates 2AI, as we now like to call. The second things, so if we consider all the other things and the development of a new corpus luteum, we are going to achieve the other main theme that we need for have good fertility, which is to have low pregnancy losses. So how we are going to do that? First, I'm going to briefly talk about the estradiol protocols, but mainly because I want to make an important consideration when we are going to use this protocol. So this is an experiment that we did in Argentina, in which we normally use an estradiol protocol, but we found that when we have high-producing dairy cows, that we also need something else to improve synchronization of the follicle wave. So in this experiment, we combine estradiol to a double dose of GnRH at the time of progesterone device insertion. But the other thing that we did is that we increased the number of prostaglandin injections to make sure that we have complete luteal regression. So if you remember, these are the point number 1 and number 3 in the key factors. So if we looked at progesterone levels, you can see here that when we gave the 2 injection prostaglandin, the cows that have the 2 injection prostaglandin have a faster luteal regression, and in fact, they have lower progesterone at the time of AI. And if we looked at the estrus expression, the cows that received the 2 injection prostaglandin, they have a higher estrus rate, and they also have lower progesterone at the time of AI. And because we did that, when we compare pregnancy rates in these protocols, here you can see the 4 groups that we have in this study. And the main thing here is that when we use a GnRH protocol, like in here, that we combine estradiol and GnRH, we need to have good and complete luteal regression to achieve high conception rate in high-producing dairy cow. So this is probably one of the first very important messages that I wanted to make in this presentation. The other thing is now many of you cannot use estradiol protocols. So you need to use other protocols. And the only other protocol that we have available today, probably we will have other protocols available in the future, is using GnRH. So then we had to use the OPSYNC protocol. And the OPSYNC protocol that was developed originally by Milo Wilban and Richard Parsley, entitled an injection of GnRH on day 0, prostaglandin on day 7, GnRH 56 hours later, and then cows are AI 72 hours prostaglandin. This was the best protocol that they have in 1995, but this protocol has been improved by many, many people that has been looking at improving fertility in dairy cows. Because one of the downsides of this protocol is that we need to have an efficient synchronization of follicular wave. And in order to have an efficient synchronized follicular wave, we need to induce ovulation. And ovulation after the first GnRH only occurs in 30 to 60% of the cows. So in order to improve that, there has been many experiments done. The first experiment was one experiment when they looked at which is the best day of the estrous cycle in which we are going to be able to induce ovulation in these dairy cows. And they found that the best time is between days 5 to 9 of the estrous cycle. So now we know when we need to have the cows in the cycle to have a good response to GnRH. So the follicles will be at that time larger than 10 millimeters in diameter. So the objective of the improvement in the offspring protocol is to increase the ovulation rate to the first GnRH. So the first things that were done is to pre-synchronize with prostaglandin, which is called the pre-sync offspring protocol. The other thing is to pre-synchronize with GnRH, like the double offspring, or another protocol that was developed in Michigan, which is called G6G, which I will explain to you later. Or the other protocol that we are using in South America is to pre-synchronize the cows with a progesterone releasing device. And we are going to talk about that later. So now the G6G protocol. The G6G means that you can give a prostaglandin injection followed by GnRH, and between this first GnRH, you have 6 days until you start the offspring protocol. So the idea is to have already an ovulation 6 days earlier. So then by the time that you give GnRH, most cows will have a corpus luteum and will also have a large follicle that will ovulate to that GnRH. So then when we look at ovulation to the first GnRH, when we look at the synchronization rate, and we looked at pregnancy rate to AI, the G6G protocol resulted in higher pregnancy rates compared to the offspring protocol. So I think this is one approach that you could use to improve pregnancy rates in your high-producing dairy cows. The other protocol, which is probably mostly used in many parts of the world, is a double offspring. And the double offspring really is similar to the G6G that I explained earlier, except that it's a complete offspring protocol, one after the other. So then we start with the GnRH protocol, giving a first GnRH, then prostaglandin 7 days later, then 72 hours later, a second GnRH is given. We try to get all the cows to ovulate. So then 7 days later, the cows will have a ACL, and we'll have a follicle that will ovulate after that GnRH. And then we're going to have very high progesterone levels during the synchronization period. And as you can see here, when this protocol was applied, especially in primiparous cows, pregnancy rates were significantly higher compared to the pre-sync offspring, and there was a tendency to improve pregnancy rates in the multiparous cows. So this is a protocol that is mostly used in North America. The only problem that I see in South America with this protocol is that it takes 27 days to apply the protocol. So sometimes compliance is a big issue, and we had to make sure that people don't forget to give all the injections required to have good fertility. In an experiment that we just presented with Stefano Alodi, Corinne Morsiani, and Paul at the World Bariatric Congress. Actually, Stefano did most of the work. Paul and I, we just compiled the work and presented, so he did actually the hard work. We compare a double offspring protocol using 2 different GnRH agonists, and we use an injection prostaglandin, which is called bioestrobet, which is produced by Vetoquinol. In this experiment, cows were high-producing dairy cows. They were producing 30 to 60 liters per day, 40 to 50 days in milk. And as you can see here, we were able to achieve with both GnRH, we have very high ovulation to the first GnRH protocol, and that's why we were able to achieve very high conception rates. In both cases, conception rates were around 50%, which, if you remember back in 1995, when the old offspring protocol was first developed, was completely unheard. So we are actually can show that we were able to increase fertility in these high-producing dairy cows. The other protocol that we developed in South America with one of my graduate students, we call the web cinch, which is mainly said that is without estradiol benzoate. And in here, instead of giving GnRH before we start the offspring, we insert a progesterone releasing device and with prostaglandin. So the idea is to create a persistent follicle that will have a higher response to this first GnRH. So then we gave this GnRH to induce ovulation. We were able to induce ovulation about 70 to 80% of the cows. And then in this case, 6 days later, we pull out the progesterone releasing device. The cows get prostaglandin. They got a dose of equine chorionic gonadotropin, and we use tail pain for estrus detection. 24 hours later, the cows got the second injection of prostaglandin, and all the cows were observed for estrus by the tail paint. When the tail paint was wrapped up by about 30%, they were inseminated at 72 hours. If the cows were not in heat at 72 hours, they received GnRH and they were AI 12 hours later. And in this case, we compare this protocol with the estradiol-based protocol, which is the protocol that we normally use in South America for lactating dairy cows. And as you can see here, the estrus expression was high in both groups, as expected, but the conception rate was higher in the group that received the Web-Sync protocol compared to the conventional. And the main reason for that is that, as I said before, we got about 70% of the cows that responded to the first GnRH. So again, there are two features to this GnRH protocol. One feature is that we have to have high efficiency in the first GnRH protocol, and the other is that we need to use a good prostaglandin to induce luteal regression and have all those cows showing estrus at the time of insemination. So in conclusion, farming needs efficient reproductive management to have favorable economic return. The veterinarian remains a key person for the implementation of management measures for efficient reproduction. Systematic implementation of reproduction programs increase, there's no doubt for that, the 21-day pregnancy rate, and I think I show you several pieces of information that confirm that. And the Timed AI can be combined with the technology of estrus detection, although we need to start AI in the cows earlier if we are going to use estrus detection for the first breeding. If we are going to use Timed AI, we need to guarantee an effective synchronization of follicular development, high concentrations of progesterone during the synchronization period, and high estrus rates and low progesterone at the time of insemination. And finally, as I said at the beginning, there are many other factors that are not discussed in this talk that significantly affect reproductive performance in dairy herds, like nutrition, health, and many other things that we don't have time to discuss right now. With that, I would like to thank very much Vetoquinol and especially Paul for the invitation. And also I would like to acknowledge my graduate students, Alejandro Macaño and Juan Carlos Chop, who did all the work, and my collaborators, Alejo, who's the next speaker, Pablo Marini from the University of Casilda in Rosario, and Luciana Ball that did some of the lab work. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you very much. A great talk. And now, with no further ado, we will ask Alejo to step in. The floor is yours, Alejo.
Hello, how are you? Great pleasure to you, Paul and Gabriel. Thank you, Vetoquinol, for the invitation. I will try to share the screen. Paul, can you see the screen?
Yes, we have it. It's full screen. Thank you very much, Alejo. So it's yours.
Okay. Wait, please. Great. So we will talk about improving gestation rates in recipient cows. And the first question is why this topic is important and is relevant in animal reproduction, in particular in embryo transfer programs. We transfer worldwide, in each year, about 2 million embryos worldwide. And so we synchronize about 2 million recipients every year. And this number of recipients synchronizing every year is the double of the recipient that we synchronized 10 years ago. So in 10 years, the number of recipients is growing to the double. And so this is a very important increasement in the number of embryos transferred and the number of recipients synchronized. When we synchronize or superovulate one donor or aspirate one donor, usually we synchronize about 7, 8, or 10 recipients per each donor. So we put a lot of money on these recipients, and this has a direct impact on the economic of the company, of the practitioner, of the farmers. So it's very important issue to take into account in an embryo transfer program. This is a pipeline or a timeline procedure or process in the embryo transfer program, in which we have first the synchronization of recipients. We have the first step here after the synchronization, that is the head or the estrus of the recipients. So we have the embryo transfer, we have the pregnancy diagnosis, and finally we have the calving of the recipients. So in these different steps, we have different failures during the process. And for example, if we have 100 cows as recipients, about 80% of them are in estrus after the synchronization protocol. So we lost about 20% of the recipients in the first step. And then at the time of embryo transfer, we lost about other 10 or 15%. So we have an utilization rate about 70%. And so at pregnancy diagnosis, we have about 50% of pregnancy. So we have only 35 recipients pregnant here. And at calving, we have about 30 females with perturbation. So we have about 30 females calving from 100 cows. So the reproductive failure here is about 70%. From an embryo perspective, if we transfer 70 embryos in this example, we have 50% of them pregnant 30 or 40 days later. And also we have no more than 30 calves at the time of birth. So in this case, the reproductive failure is about 60%. So this is a process that has a low efficiency in general. We invest on 100 animals and we have only 3 calves of prints. So this is, I think that recipient should be improved, the efficiency of the recipient should be improved to improve the efficiency of this technology. I will talk about one of these different steps in the process and how we can improve the efficiency in part of them. First, talking about the synchronization of the recipients. What do we need from a good treatment for embryo transfer synchronization? We need to synchronize the estrus of the recipients, and these protocols should be effective to synchronize both cows and heifers. They need to achieve high utilization rate. The utilization rate is the number of transferred by synchronized recipients. This protocol should be simple and easy to implement or apply in the field with very few management on the herd, on the animals, to avoid estrus detection, because estrus detection is a big problem in large-scale programs, in embryo transfer programs, and of course to obtain good conception rates and good pregnancy rates. Conception rate, that is the number of pregnant recipients on transferred recipients, and pregnancy rate, that is the pregnant animals by all the animals that were synchronized. So this is a good treatment for embryo transfer synchronization. The history of these different protocols from 40 years ago, the first system to synchronize the estrus was the use of prostaglandin with estrus detection. After that, in the last 20 years, more or less, the fixed time embryo transfer protocols were developed. The off-sync protocols that Gabriel said about the fixed time insemination also were used for fixed time embryo transfer. And after that, the estradiol and progesterone-based protocol for fixed time embryo transfer were also developed. After that, the use of estradiol, benzoate, and progesterone and ECG, equine chorionic gonadotrophin, was used in the last years. And now, in the latest years, this embryo transfer protocol were improved by the prolonged pro-estrus length protocol, in which we are working actually with the 5-day co-sync protocol with GnRH and the J-sync protocol with estradiol benzoate. This protocol, this latest protocol with prolonged pro-estrus length, improved pregnancy rate in both in fixed time insemination, but also in fixed time embryo transfer program, induced higher pre-ovulatory estradiol levels and post-ovulatory progesterone level, which improved pregnancy rate, both of them, and also improved the uterine environment during the early embryo development, which was demonstrated in different experiments. These two protocols, one of them, the 5-day co-sync protocol, consists of 5 days of progesterone treatment associated with 1 dose of GnRH at the beginning of treatment. And instead of this other protocol that is here, that is the standard or conventional protocol during 7 days, in this case, is shortened. The protocol is shortened to 5 days and associated with 2 prostaglandin doses here. And so the proestrus length here in the conventional protocol that was about 2.5 days, in this case, is prolonged to 3 days at least. And so this prolongation, this extension of the proestrus improved pregnancy rate when was evaluated in fixed time insemination, about 10% in this case with time insemination, but also improved pregnancy rate when it's associated with fixed time embryo transfer. In this study, the 5 days co-sync protocol for fixed time embryo transfer improved utilization rate in comparison with prostaglandin and heat detection protocols, and also improved pregnancy rate on day 32 and 60, about 8 to 10% higher pregnancy rate. This protocol with the 5 days co-sync program for embryo transfer consists on a dose of GnRH, progesterone 5 days, and 2 doses of prostaglandin with ECG at the time of the device removal, and GnRH 3 days later. And so embryo transfer is performed at a fixed time 7 days later. The other protocol is the J-sync protocol, also with prolonged proestrus length, and in this case is associated with estradiol that we use in South America, like Gabriel mentioned. In this case, estradiol instead of GnRH is given intramuscularly at the time of the progesterone device insertion. The device is used during 6 days instead of 8 days. and we associate with prostaglandin, and 3 days later, we use GnRH as inductor of ovulation. In this case, progesterone length is prolonged, is extended in comparison with the conventional protocol. And when we evaluate these both protocols, we evaluated in embryo transfer program, in this case with 67 in Holstein, embryos that were transferred to Hereford recipient cows. The half of the herd was synchronized with the Gestation protocol and the other half with the conventional protocol. And in this case, about more than 900 recipients were synchronized in different farms, in different replicates. And this is each replicate the pregnancy rate with both protocols, the Gestation versus conventional protocol, and pregnancy rate was in each replicate. The green protocol, the Gestation protocol, was higher, with higher pregnancy rate, 5.14, 4, 9, 8 in average, 8% higher the pregnancy rate than the other conventional protocol. So for this reason, we recommend and we use this prolonged progesterone length protocol for fixed time insemination. Also, pregnancy losses were lower with this prolonged progesterone protocol. In this case, in average, the pregnancy losses were lower than the other conventional protocol. So after we have the estrus synchronized here, and we are with the females ready to be used. Some of them are in estrus here, but others are not in estrus. Another factor affecting also the results. I want to talk about the effect of the estrus expression on pregnancy rate. This is a very nice experiment and very simple experiment done by Gabriel teams in Argentina, in which they evaluate the success of those females that are in estrus after the synchronization and the other that are not in estrus after the synchronization. The utilization rate in this case was higher than the non-estrus females. And interestingly, the conception rate, the number of pregnant recipients per transferred recipient, was higher in those females that were in estrus than the other that were not in estrus. So this is very interesting effect of the estrogen expression on pregnancy or conception rate in recipients. So the expression of the estrogen is very important also in recipients. Here is a similar study in which those cows that were in heat or not heat after the synchronization, and the pregnancy rate on day 30, 60, and calving was higher in those heifers or cows that were in heat after the synchronization. So it's very important that the females express estrus after the synchronization before the embryo transfer. Other factors affecting pregnancy rate is the body condition score. The nutrition level is very important in the recipient, of course. In this case, the utilization rate in black bars is bigger when the animals are between 2.5 to 4 points in body condition score in the scale from 1 to 5. And also pregnancy rate is higher when the animals are in good body condition score. Thinner animals and fatter animals is not good for embryo transfer, so we need a good body condition score for the animals, appropriate body condition score. Other factor important is the corpus luteum size. Of course, corpus luteum is very important because progesterone is important to establish and maintain the pregnancy. So in this case, those corpus luteum smaller than 18 millimeters, in this case, produce lower pregnancy rate. And so we recommend the use of recipient that have a larger corpus luteum than 17 or 18 millimeters. Of course, this is associated with progesterone levels in the recipient. For that, we know that after embryo transfer, the progesterone is important to maintain good levels of progesterone to ensure the pregnancy. And in this case, in this item, in this topic, the different pharmacological support has been proposed to improve pregnancy establishment and maintenance in recipient cows. The treatment with progesterone after the embryo transfer, GnRH, ACG. I will not talk about these other alternatives that were discussed in other moments, but in this case, I want to talk about the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. In this case, we know that some of them, of these drugs, has been used in the past. In the last 20 years, in this study, is a review and meta-analysis with 16 studies on about 5,000 recipient cows that were treated or not with non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, and the treatment was associated with 15 higher chance of pregnancy rate compared with not treated animals. So 15 points is a good number to take into account. In this case, I want to talk about tolfenamic acid, the tolfine or tolfine, that is a product of Vetoquinol, in which we worked in the last year with these compounds. First, we worked with in mice. We worked in collaboration with Institut Pasteur in Uruguay. They had a very big facility to work with transgenic mice. And in this case, we inject with tolfine, with tolfenamic acid, we inject the recipient's mice, we inject at the time of embryo transfer. And we evaluate fluoxetine, meglumine, and tolfenamic acid with the control group that was untreated, and pregnancy rates, and also calving rate, or in this case, birth rate, was greater with the use of tolfenamic acid. So with this in mind, with these first results, we proposed to study this phenomenon in cattle, and we worked with Sergio Maid, a colleague, a friend that we work together here in Uruguay. We also with the assistance of Paul Renaud of Vetoquinol. And we evaluate in 1,400 recipient cows in different commercial embryo transfer program with heifers and cows that were synchronized for embryo transfer and received in vivo and in vitro produced embryos, and evaluate so the embryo transfer as control group without treatment, and the other group was treated, the recipients were treated with tolfine, 2 milligrams per kilogram, and we evaluate the pregnancy rate of these two groups. When we evaluate pregnancy rate in overall results in general, the pregnancy rate was not significant, this difference, but in heifers, we have a difference, a significant difference that was about 10 points in favor of the tolfenamic acid treatment. In this case, we evaluate more than 180 animals, more or less, in each group. And when we evaluate the effect of the body condition score, we found that those cows that were thinner, that was in low body condition score, pregnancy rate was improved by the treatment, and this difference was not significant in cows with a good body condition score. So this is the scale from 1 to 8, but thinner animals are improved their pregnancy rates. When we evaluate the corpus luteum size of the recipients, we didn't find significant differences, but those cows that were with a small corpus luteum, we found a numerical difference that was not significant because we use only 50 animals in total, more or less, 53 or 54 animals. That usually we have cows with larger corpus luteum. And when we evaluate the in vitro and in vivo embryos, we didn't find a significant difference. The difference was about 6 or 4.3 points. That is not different. But when we evaluate for in vitro embryo producer, we evaluate the effect on the stage of the embryos. And we found that modular embryos were improved in pregnancy rate when we use tolfenamic acid. The other stages were not different, and we think that when the embryos are delayed in the development, pregnancy rate in this case is improved. And finally, when we have in vitro and in vivo embryos in this table, to see the differences in pregnancy rate between tolfenamic acid treated and untreated control recipient. In these cases, for example, the points in percentage that is improved by the treatment. 18 points higher was pregnancy rate of treated cows compared with not treated cows. And this was different, significant in modulus. And in heifers, we have a tendency here, but altogether, the embryo, we have about 10 points in favor of the treatment, of the tolfenamic acid treatment, and also with low body condition score, we found a tendency with the treatment of tolfenamic acid. So we talk about different factors affecting pregnancy rate and success in recipient cows. And this is a critical factor, a key factor in any embryo transfer program that should be taken into account. And approximately 70% of the cows offered as recipients suffer reproductive failure or are not calving at the end of the story. Fixed time embryo transfer improve recipient utilization rates and pregnancy rates. Prolonged progesterone length protocol for fixed time embryo transfer improve also pregnancy rates. Estrogen expression after synchronization also should be taken into account because improve pregnancy establishment and maintenance. Appropriate luteal function and corpus luteum size improve also the success of embryo transfer. And finally, the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like tolfenamic acid treatment seem to be effective in certain conditions. For example, in the layered embryo stage, like modular stages in vitro embryo transfer, for example, with recipient heifer that usually are more difficult to transfer than multiple cows, and those cows that are in low body condition score. So we talked about pharmacological control of the cows. We talk a brief details about nutrition and body condition score, but nutrition is very important. Also, of course, animal health is other key factor. Embryo quality and embryo transfer techniques also should be considered, and of course the comfort and the animal welfare of the animal. So we have other factors that should be considered in an embryo transfer program. So thank you very much again, and we are available for the discussion.
Thank you, Alejo, and thank you, Gabriel, one more time. And I have a few questions that came up. I'm slow on the translation, but I think I got it. So you can stop sharing your screen as well, Alejo, if you want to.
Yes.
Okay, so the questions, and I'm going to get to the first question for Dr. Bo. if I can. Here we go. Okay, so the first question, do you always talk about the conception rate? This is for Dr. Bo. Do you always talk about the conception rate or fertility rate and the pregnancy rate at 180? I see GG, but I'm suppose that's post-insemination or in pregnancy. This were not increased very much and returned in heat of the vacuum synchronized. So I'm not sure if that's part of the question. So do you always talk about the conception rate or fertility rate and the pregnancy rate at 180? And my assumption is days. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I said, when do we apply these protocols? Of course, when I said at the beginning, there are some key factors in which we can improve pregnancy rate. The first key factor is to have a very successful first service pregnancy rate. And this is what amounts most of the effect on calving interval will be on how many cows we get pregnant in the first service. This is like the boxing. If you hit first, then you probably have more chances of hitting second, and then you have more chances of get the other guy down. And this is the same with the eye. If you get a good fertility in the first breeding, then you can do a lot of things better. But as I said before, this is the first breeding, and you need to hit it first. But then you had to do other things to get the cows pregnant as soon as possible. So if I have more time, I would say, yes, my recommendation will be to have an effective estrus detection efficiency on the returns, because as soon as you get those cows pregnant, it's much better. So my recommendation would be to have a fixed time AI protocol for the first service, to use the electronic devices for the returns, but then not all the cows that are open or empty or are not pregnant will return to estrus. So then we need to have an effective way of confirming that those cows are actually pregnant. So then the other thing that is important is to have ultrasonography performed. Usually we do it at 32 days after the first breeding. And then those cows that did not show estrus on the return need to get pregnant as soon as possible. So then I will apply again fixed time AI protocol to those cows to get them pregnant as soon as possible.
Thank you, Gabriel. I have another question here. And actually, I'm going to elaborate more on the question, because the question is for Alejo, at what time was the application of the NSAID? But I would ask you the question, at what time was the application of the NSAID in your laboratory mice trial, and also in the cattle trial? So when did you apply the NSAID application?
The administration of Tolfine was at the time of embryo transfer in both in mice and also in cattle, just at the time of embryo transfer, when the recipient was in the shuttle. Mm-hmm. And at the time of embryo transfer, at this moment, was injected intramuscularly with a Tolfine. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I have another question for you, Alejo. I'm gonna read it out loud. ¿Cuál es la tasa de concepción en la transferencia de embriones? So what is the level of conception in the transfer of embryos? That's what I have as a question.
The conception rate was, we have two indicators, no? The pregnancy rate and conception rate. Conception rate is the number of pregnant recipient or transferred recipient. This is about between 55 and 65%. But the number of recipients pregnant by total recipient is about 50%, more or less, about the taking into account the synchronized recipient also. This is in general. And in this case, I showed the results, for example, in the experiment with Dolphine, that pregnancy rate was about 55%.
Mhm. I have another question. So there were higher results in the heifer group. And the question is there any rationale for that? Is there, for example, a bigger stress caused by this transfer or the manipulation of the animal?
Probably yes, yes. I think that, of course, in recipient, the stress during the management, you think that here in large scale programs, the animals are on pasture, are not in the stable. So usually it's the first or second or third time that the heifer are into the shuttle. So probably this is probably the cause of this difference in heifers, and also is more difficult the embryo transfer. Probably is a bit more difficult than the cattle, than the adult cows or cheaper cows.
Mm-hmm. There's a couple of questions that appear to be similar, and for you again, Alejo, in terms of have you tried other types of NSAIDs in your work? I think that we showed that, but I'll let you answer. And have you tried meloxicam in those trials?
I don't know. I never tried with meloxicam, but it will be interesting to explore. In this case, in heifer, for example, with this difference, and or for example, in vitro embryo produced in vitro with morulas that are delayed in the development stage, probably it will be interesting now. Taking into account the difference that we found, we recommend in this kind of situation. Yeah, but not with meloxicam because I don't have experience.
Yeah. So in the one trial that you did in rodents, you had in laboratory mice, you had flunixin meglumine and you had tolfenamic acid. So that's where perhaps you had a small comparison there, or a comparison there, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. There is another question here from, okay, so let me see. What is the difference between giving, this is for Gabriel, what is the difference between giving GnRH in day 10 with the insemination or in the same time of insemination and giving it in or at the day 9.5 before insemination? I hope I'm translating this correctly.
Thanks, Paul. First of all, I want to add to the previous question. We did compare using meloxicam in one of our graduate students in their specialization. They compare using meloxicam with in vivo produced embryos, and we have no significant effect. So for some reason, meloxicam didn't work as well as tolfidine in our hands. Now, going to the GnRH, usually it's better to give the GnRH about 12 hours before insemination, because when you give GnRH, the cows will usually ovulate at about 30 hours after giving GnRH. So, and if we are inseminated with frozen semen, it's better to AI the cow closer to the time of ovulation. That's why we prefer to use the GnRH later. Having said that, in some cases, we have used what we call the COSINC 72 protocol, which is given GnRH at the time of AI. In the cases that we use that protocol is when the farm conditions and the management make it very difficult for them to give an injection in the afternoon. Many dairy farms, they try to do all the treatments in the morning, and sometimes giving GnRH in the afternoon is complicated. So then in those cases, what we do, what we prefer to do is to use tail paint, for example, or a heat patch like Estrotec. And at 72 hours, all the cows that are already in heat, we eye them. And all the cows that are not in heat, they get GnRH and they eye. And in this case, we have seen that it works very well, especially in the cows that show estrus. And there are other studies done by Julio Giordano in Cornell, in which they even have extended that period to 80 hours. In those cases, what they done, they have used the estrus detection devices, the electronic devices, and after the prostaglandin, the cows are inseminated based on estrus, and then all those that did not show estrus by 80 hours, then they get GnRH and the AI. So there are different alternatives, and one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that these protocols are there to help the management of the people. So if giving a GnRH injection in the afternoon makes things complicated, then I will do the other. I will not give GnRH at 48 hours. I will wait longer because I think that we need a follicle to develop a bit more and to have high estradiol, because now we know that if the cow show estrus, it's much better. So then I will wait until 72 hours, or like Julio does it, and he presented that the Buiatrix, one of his graduate students actually presented that at the Buiatrix, he will soon wait until 80 hours.
Okay, thank you. I have one for you as well. Again, for you, Gabriel. So, ¿han observado alguna diferencia entre la buserelina et la gonadorelina? So, was there I'm understanding here, was there an observation made with a true difference between buserelina and gonadorelina in the trial?
This is a very good question. There are several studies around the world which have looked at gonadorelin and buserelin. Mm-hmm. Of course, gonadorelins, there are several gonadorelins. Not all of them are the same. And in fact, there are some studies that were done by people from Vetoquinol, actually, that in which they compare lesirelin, buserelin, and gonadorelin. Mm-hmm. Many of those studies have shown that gonadorelin will, or the other way around, sorry, buserelin will have a higher LH release than gonadorelin in many studies. But when we looked at ovulation, actually there were no significant effect. So what I would say is that we need to use a very good GnRH, that we are confident with the product, that they have a good quality control. And the other thing is that we need to have cows that have a follicle that is larger than 10 millimeters in order to have a significant effect. So if we have cows with small follicles, then we will not have a big effect.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I have I have a question for Alejo, and it's in Polish, so I just translated, not me, but the machine. So be patient with me. What is the mechanism of action of these NSAIDs that improve the CR? So I'm assuming, my assumption it's the CL, or the performance of the CL, or if it's the pregnancy rate, I'm not sure.
Great. Thank you for the question, because it's important, of course. The non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs act as anti-inflammatory. So the prostaglandin, in the case of embryo transfer, prostaglandin during the uterine manipulation with the hands, usually increase the release of prostaglandin. And so in this case, if prostaglandin F2 alpha is luteolytic, so reduce a luteolysis, induce luteolysis, or affect the corpus luteum. No, not always luteolysis directly, but affect the corpus luteum function. And so on, pregnancy rate is lower. For this reason, any drug that is anti-inflammatory, in this case with anti-prostaglandin effect may improve pregnancy rate. This is the reason.
Thank you. And the dosage during those trials, Alejo, what were they? The dosage of tolfenamic acid, it's a question that is asked.
In this case, it was 2 milligrams per kilogram live weight.
Yeah.
Probably it is, you know, this was the dose, no?
Yeah. Okay, yeah. No. It was, yes.
About 20 milliliters per animal, 25, depending of the body weight.
Oh, yeah. And there was a question as well on meloxicam. The half-life is within 24 hours. I'm not sure if I understood correctly the question, but I could respond to that in terms of the tolfenamic acid. In terms of Tmax, with tolfenamic acid, it's achieved within about 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours. Yeah, and absorption half-life is within 30 minutes. I'm doing this from memory, so don't hold me accountable to that. But the Tmax, I know it's within somewhere around 2 to 3 hours with tolfenamic acid. I have a question for Dr. Bo. Does mating to the corner of the uterus on the side where the follicle is located increase the effectiveness of mating?
That's a very good question. And when we started working with sex semen, we thought that we could improve pregnancy rates by AIing on the side of the dominant follicle. But then many other experiments that were done after that showed no difference. So what I would recommend is that you are sure that you pass the cervix, because the problem in many cases is that people, when they think that they are AIing and they are depositing the semen in the body of the uterus, they are actually doing in the cervix. And if you do an intracervical insemination, you will have a significant reduced pregnancy rate compared to a intrauterine insemination. The matter of the other thing that we know is that sometimes if you go a little bit into the uterine horn, the semen actually makes through the other horn as well. So if you have to be sure that you pass the cervix. And even if you go a little bit, usually inseminators go a little bit into the right horn because they use the left hand. And the semen makes it through both uterine horn. So it's no problem with that. So the main answer is there's no need to go too deep, because sometimes if you go too deep, you can damage the uterus, and that is very bad for fertility. But you have to be sure that you pass the cervix.
Thank you, Gabriel. We're running out of time. I'm going to take one last question. My apologies to everyone. The questions are coming in, and we can't answer them all, but we're transcribing them, so we hopefully can reach back to you and give you an answer either through Alejo or myself or through Gabriel. The one last question that we have, and perhaps I may participate in the response, but I will give the floor to Alejo and Gabriel on this. Is natural or synthetic prostaglandin better? That's a big question, huh?
Well, yes. I will give my portion. First of all, we don't have natural prostaglandin, because even the ones that are called natural are not natural. They are synthetic as well. What we call natural prostaglandin, they are more like the natural prostaglandin, but they are not the same. So the difference is that what is called the natural prostaglandin, you need a higher dose compared to, let's put it in names. If you compare dinoprost with chlorprostanol, and this is like, I would put it in maybe I can talk about soccer or football in Spain. It's like you are from Barcelona or you are from Real Madrid. Okay.
Yeah.
If you are if you cheer for Barcelona, you'll find information saying that Barcelona is better than Real. If you cheer from Real, you're going to find information where Real is better than Barcelona. And this is the same with dinoprost and chlorprostanol.
Yeah.
The main thing is what I said before for the GnRH. You had to be sure that you use a good prostaglandin. If we are talking about dosage, of course, synthetic prostaglandins are more potent than the natural prostaglandins, because for the natural prostaglandin, you use a 25 milligram dose. And if you use a reduced dose, they don't work. With the cloprostenol, you need 500 micrograms. So if you use the right dose, then it will work very well. This is what I think.
Yeah, thank you, Gabriel. We have 1 minute left, and I need 1 minute for the au revoir to everyone. Alejo, any thoughts on prostaglandins before we leave?
Great explanation of my friend Gabriel.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you both, Gabriel and Alejo. I hope everyone enjoyed their participation. Please look out for us, because we will be doing another webinar on another topic in the Achieve Better Milk Together concept of Vetoquinol. Again, thank you to everyone. Danke schön, muchísimas gracias, grazie mille to everyone who participated, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.